Good morning, or actually good morning for some, good afternoon for others. Welcome to our mental health Q&A. We've decided that we're going to do a monthly mental health check-in. We've got David Camarena with us. Thank you for joining us, David. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm inspired by your countdown and your intro. It's so
Yeah?
fancy. I'm
Yeah, I
like,
just
this
got
is
it on
so cool.
I just got it on like Fiverr or something. So
It's awesome.
I love it. I feel so official with it.
I'm so
So
pumped right now.
yeah, so I've got a link. There's a couple ways that you can submit your questions. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave a comment. Other people will be able to see your name that way. There is the Google form document, which will allow you to submit any questions anonymously, should you choose. That link is in the description. And then the third way is through the live stream link. So I will add that in the comments on both Facebook and YouTube right now. So y'all can join us and ask David any questions that you have. But for today's topic, while we're waiting for questions to come in, we're going to talk about anxiety. So I'll hand it over to David.
Yeah. So this is actually one thing. It's funny because people always interview me saying, "Oh, you're a therapist. You work with people. What's something that you always see in therapy that maybe people struggle with or they have a problem with?" And it's really interesting, but like I would say about 70-80% of my clients have some form of anxiety. So whether it's like just the passive, like, "Oh my gosh, like everything is a stressor for me in my life," to like full-blown PTSD, to like panic attack anxiety. And then there's people who just have casual anxiety. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But then like twice a month, I just get hit with a panic attack. You know what I'm saying? Which is like you see more and more in this generation. And I think as you know, I'm sure everybody who is like going through a quarter life crisis even are now calling it a quarter life crisis. We never used to have that. I feel like these generations now are more fast paced. We're put in more stressful situations like economy collapse or job loss, like we've been talking about. So there's just a lot in our environment that I really feel is fueling anxiety, and I'm seeing it more than ever in treatment. So it's something definitely that I wanted to talk about because anxiety is a very more common thing. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm seeing more of it. So. So something got cut off with your audio. Like I can't hear it. Something happened.
Whoops,
Okay,
I accidentally muted
you're
myself.
back. You're back. I was like, I cannot hear you.
No, I'm back.
So now I can hear you.
Yeah, no worries. I was just adding in the links into
Okay.
the Facebook and YouTube account so other
All right.
people can join us if they want. Thank you guys for tuning in. And yeah, so I've actually never heard of people being fine most of the time and then just getting really bad
Right.
anxiety a couple times a month.
Oh yeah.
Is it, I mean, I'm sure it's depends on a case by case basis,
Yeah.
but do those people, are they classified as having like a generalized anxiety disorder?
Yeah, so to qualify for a disorder, for a generalized anxiety disorder, we call it GAD for short in psychology. Basically, you would have to have a number of factors to qualify for that diagnosis in terms of this would be like daily anxiety. So sweaty palms, racing heartbeat, excessive fear and worry, excessive feelings of doom or impending doom. These would all be like together. So, panic attack like symptoms, as well as always like maybe even some paranoia or paranoid thoughts that drive and fuel these negative thinking patterns. So anxiety kind of is an umbrella of a lot of those symptoms, and usually to be part of that diagnosis, you would have to have at least 5 of these specifiers like daily, not just
Mm.
weekly. This would be like daily. So people who have those symptoms daily, I would say, definitely consult a therapist or get an evaluation if you think you might have it. But if you just are type person who's like, I'm generally fine, but then one day I'll just get a panic attack. Also, that's something to look at too, because normally people shouldn't have panic attacks. And when it does
Yeah.
happen, sometimes people are just in a calm state. And I've had people ask me like, how come I have a panic attack when I'm just sitting reading a book, or I'm doing something calming and then a panic attack hits me? And it goes back to like the hormone release in the body. So if we're in a fight or flight response, our bodies tend to want to like store those hormones, and then it just, when it gets full, just releases in the body at one time. So it's kind of like, this is where anxiety, panic attacks lead to not managing our daily stressors. And then this cortisol release, this excess cortisol kind of builds up, and then boom, it hits you like a ton of bricks sometimes.
So when you're in a calm state of mind and you're not really doing any physical activity and this cortisol is building up,
Yeah.
is that why it's important for people to, work out every day and get moving? I mean, we hear that it's a natural stress reliever, and not everyone is going to want to hit the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week in order to maintain that anxiety. But what's a good approach if you're not like going to the gym every single day?
Oh yeah, totally. So I think step one would be, where's your health at? A lot of people don't realize this, but anxiety is also infected not only by your thoughts, it's also environment and things you're putting in your body. So if you're not in a already stressful work situation or a stressful situation, um, you have to be mindful of what you're consuming. So, are you taking a multivitamin? A lot of anxieties have been linked to lack of vitamin B in your diet, or exercise, moving that body flow, because if you're just sitting down and stressing out, your cortisol has nowhere to go. Your fight or flight response is just simmering, and your body needs to get those things out. So that's why, yes, exercise is super important. At least 3 to 4 times a week. Once a day would be ideal. At least walk around, to go for walks if you on your break time. So exercise is really important. Avoiding caffeine and stimulants. I know people that like knock back monsters or rock stars all the time, and I'm like, if you have anxiety, that's not the best idea, because that's a stimulant. It usually picks people up and makes them more anxious and nervous. And so obviously caffeine is an addiction. I know I have to have my cup of coffee every day, but if you're struggling with anxiety, it might be an idea to drink decaf or scale back the caffeine intake, because all those things can affect these feelings of worry or anxiety, and in your daily life. So those are just some things to be mindful of.
Nicotine is also one that can definitely not help with the anxiety.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because that constricts your blood vessels. People don't realize when you smoke, it's
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
So that's why they say cigarettes are bad for you, because there's scientific studies that prove it could lead to stroke, because your blood vessels are just shrinking up when you're smoking. So the blood flow is not flowing. That's why exercise is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some good exercises?
So I always kind of take people back to deep breathing. Deep breathing, you'd be surprised, is really helpful. So you start from 10 to 1, or even go higher, like count to 50 all the way down to 1, and try to slow down your counting, and also deep breathe every time you count. People who practice this after a while start really responding to it. And it's so simple, but it's also hard to do when you're feeling like nervous or anxious, or so I always say, like, just count slow, take a deep breath, don't rush through it. So you exhale, and then breathe in, hold that breath, and then exhale again, and then just count in your head 4 seconds. So you breathe out 4 seconds, inhale out 4 seconds, hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then release for 4 seconds. And I call that square breathing, because it's like a square. There's 4.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I heard that called box breathing.
Yeah. So box breathing, square breathing, they're all the same thing. If you Google a quick like breathing exercises, these are really helpful for people. Just in the moment when you're feeling this way, just start with deep breathing. I think that's the first thing. And then grounding yourself. So this could be something where you're focused on away from your problem or issue, and just start focusing on like where you're at in that time. Like get a cup of tea and drink it, and then think about the flavors in your mouth, and think about the texture, if there's any texture, or the temperature of the drink. Those things can kind of ground your body to focus on something else, and listen to your body, what it's doing. That'll slow down the process of what's happening.
I really love grounding techniques. Honestly, one of my favorite things is touch. When I'm extremely anxious, I just start touching things, And even my sweater, it's got like ridges here, and then it's a knitted material. So I pay very close attention to how it feels, you know, and it's not just, there's so much that I can't even articulate just in a very simple, you know, texture and all the different aspects of it. For me, when I concentrate on something like that, it gets my mind focused in on one thing and not getting lost in all of my anxiety thoughts. Grounding techniques are among my favorite coping techniques.
Yeah, I remember those fidget spinners that were really popular and like calm.
Yeah. Do
Yeah,
those actually help?
they actually do help. I mean, there was some data to suggest that it helps people calm down. So yeah, that was actually backed by a study that I read. So I mean, it's just, but if you think about it, it's still a grounding technique because you're focusing on something else or you're touching something else. And those things, what grounding is paying attention to the senses. So it's like, you know, paying attention to sight, taste, smell, touch, feel, right? Or even a visual distraction. That's all part of grounding because you're distracting from the issue and focusing on something else, which is great for temporary, but you know, definitely long term, it's better to restructure the thinking process behind, you know, these feelings of panic or worry that people may have. And then also like counting your pulse. Like I know people who just like put their hand on their neck, they feel their pulse and they count it. They try to slow down their heart rate. You know, those things help too. So.
I want to say hello to everybody who is joining us. We've got a few people. Cool. Thank you guys for supporting the show. I want to ask, how are you doing today? It's December. I've got my ugly Christmas sweater. Awesome. And holidays can be a very stressful time for people. Is Christmas next? Oh my gosh, Christmas is next week. So, yep. You know, check in with yourself. How are you doing today? Are you rushing to get gifts? Are you stressed out because you're gonna see family or you can't see family? Are you traveling? Are you worried about, you know, the COVID situation? David, when people are checking in with themselves, how often should they do it? And what are some things you should ask yourself when you're checking in on your mental health?
I think it's a really important thing. I'm glad you brought that up. We call it daily self-care reminders. So this is basically a daily check-in. And it's exactly how you just kind of phrased it. It's kind of like, how are you doing today? So it's not like, you know, you're going to look like a crazy person talking to yourself walking down the street, but it's really important to have these conversations in your mind, because if you don't do them, then you're not being cognizant or reflective of your own personal mental health. So first step would be, how are you feeling today? How am I doing today? Am I hydrated? Did I get enough sleep? Am I eating right? Is my body in check? You know, that's probably step one, because if your physical health or medical health isn't well, your mental health is going to kind of not be well as well. You know, it's going to be a combination that you need to be mindful of. So, you know, take care of yourself, self-care, self-love, and then come in with the thoughts of, okay, I'm feeling a little anxious or overwhelmed. A good go-to is calling a friend, like just getting it out of your body, because often when people bottle their emotions or they bottle their thoughts and fears and worries and they don't get it out, what happens is it's like shaking a can of soda. It's like when you open that later, it's going to just blast in your face and it's just going to go everywhere and it's going to be horrible. Same thing with mental health. If you just are not relieving that pressure within you and getting these things out of your body that maybe is driving you crazy, as people say, it's driving me crazy. If you don't get those things out, phone a friend, exercise, those things that your body wants to get rid of, those negative feelings, then you know, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So I always tell people, phone a friend, you know, write a letter, do a gratitude journal, watch a funny comedy video. If comedy is your coping skill, do something that's going to make you feel better. Not only physical health, but also mental wellness, you know, and that's the most powerful thing you can do, is just call a supporter, call an emotional supporter. Research on the internet. What is deep breathing? What is grounding? What is a grounding technique? What is guided imagery? These are all coping skills that people learn that help manage something that might feel overwhelming. So
if you want to phone a friend, how would someone get over the fear of being a burden to someone? I
Yeah.
get that feeling too often.
Yeah. So explain that to me because I want to hear your perspective on that.
So from my personal perspective, sometimes like I have certain friends who I'll tell certain things to because I can relate to them or they can relate to me in different ways. So that's one way that I determine which friend I want to call.
Right.
But if I feel like I'm calling them too much
Right.
and just it's only negative that I'm sharing with them, then they're going to associate negativity with me, and I don't want to come off that way with a friend. I don't want them to make that association with me. And so then I start to worry that I'm going to feel like a burden to them.
Oh yeah.
And I've had one of my best friends actually also, I believe also has very similar thoughts.
Yeah.
So
And
that can be a struggle.
I would think being respectful is always, the best route to go. And I think one thing that I do when I call a friend is I always kind of prep them before I start talking. So I don't just call and just like word vomit. I basically call and say, hey, you know what? I kind of have an issue I'd like to talk to you about. Only if you're okay with me sharing that issue right now. And
Mm-hmm.
usually my friends are pretty good about like, oh yeah, I have time to talk about this, or if they don't, they'll be like, you know what, this is not a good time for me. Don't, and then I don't take it personal. But it's good to have boundaries with your friends or understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have mutual understanding of what works and what doesn't. Like you said, yes, it's very mindful to have boundaries. Don't just like call your friends and just vent on that one friend and always be negative with them. I think that's could be toxic. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, having personal boundaries is very important. Being respectful of your friends, always asking if it's okay as well. But that's the thing. I think people are afraid to ask for help, and people are afraid to
Yeah.
reach out and actually share these things because it's like, well, I don't want them knowing my business, or So I'm well aware that there's a lot of issues preventing this, but I think that also creates the new problem, which is like, but if you bottle it and you have nobody to talk to about these things, that's where mental health starts suffering, because it's like it's just being bottled now, and like
Mm-hmm.
taking a can of soda, one day you're gonna explode in some form. Either you're gonna let out your emotions negatively on somebody else. It's called emotional dumping,
Yeah.
or have you, I mean, I'm sure I've worked with coworkers who come in and I'm like, what happened to them? Like they must have had a rough day yesterday at home after work, because they were happy yesterday and now they're coming into work really hot and really upset and like
Mm-hmm.
taking it out on everybody, which creates a toxic work environment sometimes. So I definitely
Yeah.
think it's because of that lack of sharing sometimes. That our ego sometimes is so like, don't tell anybody because we don't want people to think we're weak or wounded, and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of, it's a disservice because it's actually hurting yourself for not getting it out. I feel so.
Right. Right. And so, what are some ways that when you catch yourself giving off such a negative energy, or you catch yourself kind of being toxic? I mean, it's just the same way of, it's another way of saying like casting negative energy. And
Mm.
when you do that, people around you, it brings the mood down.
Oh,
So when you
totally.
catch yourself doing that, what's a good way to reset?
So I love that you brought up the word energy, because it's really, I love that word because it's such a great word to describe a situation, like walking into a room and feeling the energy of the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people come in and set the tone for that and not even realize they are setting a tone for that, where they're like, oh my gosh, I just walked out of that meeting and it was really tense. But then, oh yeah, I came in pretty tense. So it's probably my fault. Or somebody
Mm-hmm.
rubbed me the wrong way. I was happy. And then I became tense because they triggered me
Right.
emotionally. So now I'm somewhere else. So what I like to do with the energy is I like to convert it into good energy. So for example, if I'm really upset, which it's very normal to get upset about something in a job, especially, or we're working with people you can't, or there's things that you can't control, you get upset. What I do with that energy is as I work harder to do something
Mm-hmm.
positive for myself. So I put it back into my work. So if I'm upset, I'm like, I am so mad right now. I'm going to use this energy. I'm going to work double hard to get this task done or finish this project. And when I'm done, it's going to be amazing. And so what happens is that's what usually happens. I take that anger and rage, I fuel it into passion, into work ethic. And then when I'm
Mm-hmm.
done, I'm like, actually glad I will use that energy to do this, because now that it's done, I did a better job than if I would have come in and calm on this project or job. So you can always convert a negative into a positive. It's like your choice. What are you going to do with that energy? Are you going to use it to like emotionally dump on someone and like, or ruin someone else's day? Or are you going to use it to fuel it into something positive for yourself that could help other people too? Who knows? So
I was trying to help a student the other day at a safety class understand reframing thoughts.
yeah, that's a good one.
He kept saying, and I understand why this is useful, but I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you're using that word a lot, but you're saying hate a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And that's a strong word. It's one thing to find something as minorly inconvenient or you dislike something, but to just constantly say, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, you're just reinforcing all that negativity in your head. And when you get frustrated, even if it's something minor, it's going to like magnify in your mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was telling this student that when he catches himself saying, I hate this, to focus more on why it's useful
Right.
and why we do it that way. If you can see the usefulness in a technique, even if you're frustrated with it or, it's a whole other story, but just focus, like take a negative and turn it into a positive.
Yeah. I would say
Yeah.
what's really important for people to do if you guys want to work on your mental health, start with cognitive distortions. It's something I use in
I
CBT.
was just going to ask you about
Yeah.
those.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is we always talk about cognitive distortions because cognitive distortions, for people who don't know, it's basically faulty or error thinking. And those things are trapping to people. And it's stuff that we use every day and we don't realize we're doing it. And so if people educate themselves on what are cognitive distortions, what are those thoughts, we can start working away from breaking those bad habits, such as disqualifying the positives, for example. Oh, like I didn't get this amount for this thing, so therefore I'm a failure, I'm not good enough because I didn't earn this for my effort or my work. And so that's kind of like a cognitive distortion. Basically, you've just disqualified any positive about you because you're just focusing on that one negative thing about that happened. And so I always say instead of just focusing on what you don't have or didn't earn or didn't get, focus on, well, you know what, I'm still a good person, I value myself, there's a lot of good qualities about me, I have had successes. For every one success there might be 10 failures, but there also is a success. So it's always like that reframe, like you're saying, focus on,
Mhm.
well, let's focus on the positive, because if we just focus on the negative, we're just going to stay in the negative. Like it's that simple.
Right.
you know
Right. What are some other cognitive distortions?
Yeah, so a very common one that most people have that I've seen is black and white thinking patterns. So they literally think the world is black and white. It's like it's yes or no, black or white. But in reality, the world is very gray. There's a lot of maybe, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of I don't know. Like ask anybody what's going to happen next year. We don't know yet. We don't know. We have speculation, we just don't know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so black and white thinking is dangerous because if people live in the black or the white, it's kind of too extreme, and then at that point you're being unrealistic by saying
Mm-hmm.
all or nothing thinking. Like I remember when I was growing up, I love my mom, but she would always kind of scare me with, if you don't do this, you're either gonna go to jail or you're gonna die. It was like these
Oh my
huge
God.
extremes of like,
There was no in between.
yeah, it was like there's no in between. It's like you're either gonna die or go to jail, so don't do this. And in my mind, I'm like, you just limited possibility. Like life is more than just two things, two options. So that's just something really important for people to remember, because when you were caught up in our emotions, our thoughts lie to us, and
Mm-hmm.
we tend to go to these extremes. And you see that in cancel culture all the time. The world we live in now, it's all about like cancel culture. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's no critical thinking. There's just like, that didn't work out, that's too hard for me to process, I'm out, I quit, I
Yeah.
block, I ghost. And I think that's very dangerous because we're falling prey to our cognitive distortions instead of working on our mental health. We're just cancel it. So, which is
Right.
I feel very unhealthy for people to do or practice regularly.
Right. We have a few listeners. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I see we just got a comment come in. Oh, Pedro, sorry I'm late. It's all good, bro. It's good to have you. So for most of these live streams, we've been talking for an hour, and I figure we could just keep this one at a short and sweet 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So, to fill up some time, David and I are just chit-chatting about different aspects of mental health. Today, we're heavily focused on anxiety. I imagine next month we may focus more on depression or suicide awareness, and yeah, so this is this is the very first one. And this is kind of, it's laid back. I'm traveling right now, traveling for work, and I don't have my typical setup, but yes, we just wanted to check in on the community, see how you guys are doing. If you want to just curl up to your laptop or your computer with a coffee or tea and just chill, that's cool. Like, that's what this is all about. We're here for you. And if you have any pressing questions in regards to mental health, it could be pretty general. It could be somewhat personal. And if you want to submit a question anonymously, we've got the Google form. If you don't care about being anonymous, you can also leave a comment either on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. And then I also included the link to join this live stream. So if you click on it, you'll get sent to a green room, and I can see you, and I click on your picture, and then you're up here with us live.
I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah. So I figure, we'll get a couple feelers, see how it's going.
Sure.
And yeah, Pedro said this is a very much needed topic to be discussed. Totally agree. Pedro, here's a great question, Pedro. What advice would you give PTSD for dads?
For guys, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Pedro, there's the link to join this live stream. If you want to hop on and join us, man, you're totally welcome to. I would love to have you up here chit-chatting with us. I'll go ahead and see if I can post that. There's that link. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention, Pedro, thanks for that question. It's a great question. I really get this asked all the time, actually, where people are like, do I have PTSD? I'm like, well, you might have some maybe symptoms of it. Doesn't mean you have PTSD. But yeah, no, it's a very, very real thing. PTSD is something that affects a lot of veterans, we hear, but it actually affects a lot of people who've had trauma in their life, whether it was like some kind of physical trauma, some even people who were watching a natural disaster event, or so it's not limited to just war. PTSD comes from many forms, like trauma, abuse in childhood. It could even be like even witnessing a natural disaster, witnessing a murder, people who've raised in tough streets where they're like, oh yeah, this guy got murdered down the street, and it's normal for me to see things like that. These things later on can develop into PTSD because it's traumatic, and maybe your body's in shock and doesn't process that. But then you can't sleep. You get night terrors. You can be walking around, you hear a sound, and then you're like, hit the deck, I'm scared. So PTSD, my recommendation is for people who may think they have PTSD, talk to a therapist about it, get evaluated. You might not have it, you might have it. Don't focus on the diagnosis, just focus on the wellness and getting better. But yeah, guys usually don't go to therapy because there's that stigma of the ego, and we actually see less men in therapy than females, but hopefully that does change.
So I'm so glad Pedro took me up on the offer. He's with us right now. I'm going to add you to the stream. Hey, Pedro, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
It's good to see you.
I'm great, man.
Good to see you.
Super awesome. So, like I said, this is our very first mental health check-in Q&A session. And yeah, so if you guys want to join us with this link here, then, I waved. I saw Pedro. He was in the green room. And then, and I can add him to the stream. And now you can go ahead and ask your questions to David directly. So I'm gonna just hop out for a second. I can still see you guys.
Oh, cool. No problem.
Nice.
All right, Pedro. So give me what you got. What would you like me to answer?
No, and the reason why I asked that, I tried to interact with Siobhan's live stream and just asking that question, because a lot of dads don't know that it's okay not to be okay. So what advice would you give dads, men in general, on them suffering from PTSD? And most people think PTSD is strictly related to the military, and it's
Right,
not.
right,
There's certain
right.
things that go on. Having your
Oh yeah.
first child, So what advice would you give men and dads in general?
I would say that it's okay to reach out. I think for a lot of men, it's very hard for men to open up about their mental health or even have that conversation about, hey, I'm not feeling okay. I'm feeling kind of sad. I'm feeling kind of nervous. I'm feeling kind of, I'm feeling a certain way that I can't describe or I can't even, begin to explain to somebody. And for men, it is hard to talk about that. I being a man myself, I know it's not easy to just say, hey, you know what? I got a lot of trauma. I got a lot of fears. I got a lot of worries. It's just not something men talk about, and I think that's something that should change. I think that's something that should be normalized. So my advice would be like, don't be afraid to tell someone, I'm not feeling all right. And let me tell you why. Let me open up a little bit. Because we
Hmm.
tend to shut up, we just tend to be quiet and not
Yeah,
share. So sharing is very important. I think that's step one, is
yeah,
opening up, not being afraid.
and
So,
definitely sharing is caring, and
uh-huh.
I've been known to have a little bit of PTSD myself, being in the military, being a dad. But once I figured out that it was okay to not be okay, to be
Yeah.
vulnerable and show, that you do have feelings, you do have sentiments, and
Yeah.
certain things that come through your body. It's just that's great advice. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh yeah, of course. And I just wanted to remind you, if you know anybody who's like struggling like through anything, mental health, it doesn't have to be PTSD. What if it's depression, right? Or anything
Yep.
else? Just encourage them. Yeah, you know what? We're men. We can open up too. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
just for the ladies. We
Yeah.
can be vulnerable together. And I think that creates some of the most powerful male bonding friendships I've ever seen. I have a best friend I can call up right now, tell him about things that I'm struggling with, and he listens. And sometimes people always ask me like, what should I do? What should I do? The most powerful thing you can do is listen. And I think people don't realize that. A lot of people talk to respond. They don't talk to listen. And I
Right.
think that's something I want to remind people. If you're just there for a friend and you just listen, that's more than the world, because there's people who feel I was never listened to my whole life. Nobody listened to me.
Yeah.
you know, so listening is very powerful. So that's another thing I want to mention. Yeah. So you're doing the right thing, Pedro. It sounds like you're a very supportive guy and you're able to share and open. And if you do that with other guys, you're already changing the world in your own way, in your own community. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks.
awesome. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Siobhan,
Pedro.
for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
yeah,
question. It was
yeah.
great.
Good question. Thanks for being here, and even just you being here talking to David is changes that culture,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Very much changing that culture.
See,
So
Pedro's a feeler, he's a perceiver, and I think that's great to kind of spread that awareness to men, because that is the hardest thing, is to get a man to admit, I'm struggling, I'm not feeling okay. That's really hard for some
yeah.
guys to do.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see more and more people just be totally honest with like the guy's experience in the world. And I just never really knew until maybe this year that men struggle,
Yeah.
and they've been told, because I have the female perspective and I have like my list of stigmas that have been kind of that I've experienced, but men are taught boys don't cry, men don't
Right.
cry,
Mhm.
bottle your emotions, be strong, you are the breadwinner, the supporter, you take care of the family, like you take care of everybody, and but you don't take time to like take care of yourself, but if you show emotion you're perceived as weak. And I had no idea that that was very much a struggle until more and more men were opening up about it this year. And I see it on TikTok
Yeah.
or on social, just different social media accounts, really. And I love it. Like, I'm really happy that guys are just being honest with themselves
Yeah.
and with society.
I hope
Because
I hope
we,
we Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
oh, go, no,
Uh,
that was it.
I was saying I hope the culture does start to change as we talk about mental health more. In these podcasts and things like this, these are great. This is why I love doing these things, because you don't know who's watching out there who may have needed to hear this message today or yesterday. So I'll even share a vulnerability for myself. Is I used to think that crying was weakness. I used to always think that I'm a man, I don't cry. And to this day, like, I probably cry once every 2 years or 3 years. Like, I've even like had this in my body, in my mind, that you don't cry. So for me to cry, it takes a lot to get there. But
Yeah.
that's because my body trained itself, I don't cry. That's not what I do. But in reality is that's a lie, because, even though we're male, we have feelings, we have emotions, and we express ourselves in different ways. And I just want to remind people that crying is actually a sign of strength. It's not weakness. And the reason why crying is strength is because crying means you've come to a point where you're vulnerable with yourself. You've let the ego go. You've let your pride go. And now you're actually facing your issues and facing the things that emotionally trigger you or bother you. And that takes a lot of strength to face that. And I think it's easier to run away from your problems. It's easier to bottle it. So I always like to tell people this acronym, FACE, FACE, which stands for you either face everything and rise, or you face everything and run, which is fear. Sorry, it's not face, it's fear. So it's like the only thing that holds us back is us. And I always want to remind people that crying is strength, because you're actually facing those things that make you afraid, and why we don't face those things that may impact our mental health.
Yeah, it's just like going through another obstacle course, right?
Exactly,
We think about the Spartan races and how badass it is to finish those, do the mud runs, go over the wall, do the climb.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. If that's a perception of strength, well, the whole crying thing and facing your emotions is just facing another obstacle.
Exactly.
I appreciate this comment. And when women work in a male-dominated field, we have to hide our emotions as well. And in my experience, I'm just speaking on behalf of Siobhan and her little world.
I like it.
Guys think that women are the emotional ones, right? Because we are more open about our feelings. We're more open for communication when it comes to stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But if that's perceived as weakness, right, then guys view women as the emotional creatures. But guys are also emotional creatures. They're very emotional.
Yes.
And it just comes out typically as different emotions. Anger, frustration. I mean, those are the big ones, right? I don't know how common it is for men to go through anger management. Is that more of a guy issue than a girl issue, or is there no correlation?
I mean, I definitely think that males struggle more with aggressive type behaviors.
Aggression is another,
anger. I think women have same levels of anger. It's just manifested differently, if that makes sense, So it's kind of like women are a little bit more argumentative, and from what I've seen, and then men are a little bit more, there's no talking, I punch you in the face.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's like
it's a good comparison, right?
Yeah, it's like, Go ahead, comment on that.
It seems like men, when they complain about their wives or girlfriends all the time, we're always perceived as nags. We're nagging. But I love your comparison, because we're both experiencing these emotions. They manifest differently. Yes. And I really think that's an important thing to consider, and when we start breaking down these stigmas, these stupid, just these thoughts that were produced by society or whatever. I mean, think about it. If men are more vulnerable with themselves and they take care of themselves, they allow themselves to experience different emotions, and we accept emotions, then women working in male-dominated fields, we're not seen as like these crazy emotional creatures. I always think that when guys call a female crazy, it's like deflection.
Yeah.
So
no, totally. Yeah, that's the thing too. It's like it's really sad to hear either gender stereotype people, because I always hear that. Like, I've had people, I work in a female dominated industry, so I'm in the opposite wheelhouse where I'm the only male in a female circle. But that's one thing that I've seen working with females is sometimes, not just females, but men do this too. They'll assume because I'm a male that I'm going to be a certain way. So when they meet me, they're like, oh, like, we can't really talk to him because like he's going to think this or feel this way because he's a man. He's going to judge us differently. But the reality is, once those walls come down and they get to know me, they're like, oh, wow, I can trust you better than some of my female coworkers. So it's kind of like, it's nice to break those stereotypes. Being a male in a female dominated industry was fun for me because I was able to kind of break those stereotypes that not all men are the same, just like not all women are the same. You
Yeah,
know,
that's
we're
a big
all
stereotype
we're all
I try to break in my male-dominated industry.
Yeah, and we're not all the same, definitely. Like,
Yeah.
I value, respect, and admire women leaders, powerful women leaders. And if a woman's my boss, I think it's awesome. I think it's a cool thing. I think I'm like, that's what we want to see the world head towards, not just stereotyping, not holding people to certain standards, but just letting people do what they do best, whether they're female, whether they're male, whether they're, whatever, gender association you want to call yourself. That's fine. More power to you. We shouldn't let those things limit us and who we want to be, or we shouldn't put labels on people and force our expectations or ideals on them either. It's not fair. So, because we're all different, we're all unique. We're all special in our own way. So,
Yeah, totally, completely agree.
yeah.
And I love this comment, Pedro. You have to fill your own cup to be able to help others fully.
Yes.
So, just
Yeah,
going back to those daily check-ins.
And I love to remind people too of this: is broken doesn't fix broken. As much as someone has a big heart, usually those people are hurt most. Sometimes it's like they want to fix everyone, and then when I talk to them, I'm like, yeah, but who's fixing you? Are you working on you? Are you fixing yourself? Because I see you care about a lot of people and you want to help people and you want to heal them, but are you healing yourself? Are you okay? And that's the thing. Sometimes fixers and healers are wounded, are the broken ones, and they're just kind of emulating what they would want for themselves. But in reality, it's like we need to give those things and be kind to ourselves, because if we're not kind, broken doesn't fix broken. Fix broken. So
Yeah.
I want to remind people that be careful before you help someone, make sure you're okay. Because if you're not okay, people are going to feel that. It's like bottling your emotions. Like I said, it could just get out of control and lead you to a dark place. And that's tough for people. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
definitely.
totally agree. And it's not selfish,
No,
right?
it's not. Yeah,
Not
that's the thing.
selfish to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, I can't love myself. Like, I'm like, why not? They're like, because that's selfish. And I told them, well, is it selfish if you actually don't work on yourself and then you go out in the world and then other people start feeling who you are, and then that energy enters the room, right? Because you're not well. Guess what? You've kind of poisoned the water hole, and now everybody's a little toxic because of your energy. And people don't realize that their energy does affect the outer world. It really does impact others. Think about all the times you're somewhere and you hear someone speak and you're like, oh my gosh, they're totally just like really taking out their anger on this poor person that they don't know, or they're really shouting at someone when they really are mad at themselves for something. And so, yeah, it starts with you and being well, because if your mental health's not well, everyone's going to know you're not well. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah,
and this was really great. I'm really glad we had Pedro hop on and chit chat with us a little bit. And we got some good comments in. Thank you guys for that. I'd like to wrap this up unless anybody has any more questions or comments, consternations, quips, quotes, queries, conundrums.
Yeah, my last quote I love to tell people is, that's basically the takeaway of today is like, are you going to face everything and rise, or are you going to face everything and run? And the option is yours. If you want to work on your mental health, it's the best decision you could ever make. Being vulnerable, like Pedro said, being open. These are the things that are going to get us on a road to recovery and healing and to a better mental health place where we can start, appreciating who we are as people, so that if we love ourselves, we're going to greater love others, because now we can effectively make that change. So
that's perfect.
That's my message for today.
I think that's a wonderful message to leave this on. And so, my fellow explorers, until next time, I will see you on our next adventure. Take care of yourself. We'll check in again next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.